Welcome to This Day in His Story, created by American Heritage Worldwide. A reminder that every day holds something new to learn. Did you know that Frederick Douglass was secretly taught to read by the aunt of his plantation master, and how, at the age of 16, he taught more than 40 slaves to read the New Testament? Follow Douglass as he became a trusted advisor to President Lincoln and formed the first all-black Union regiment to fight for the North in the Civil War.
You know, I thought I had a pretty good handle on Frederick Douglass. When you hear the name, you immediately get this picture in your head.
The icon, yeah.
Yeah.
The lion with the white mane, the statesman in the suit.
Exactly. But I found this one detail in the source material that just, it really stopped me. It's about his birthday.
The February 14th date.
Yeah. I mean, on the surface, it sounds almost trivial. He was born into slavery, so of course, no birth certificates. He had no idea when he was actually born. So he just picked February 14th.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason why he picked it, it's not whimsical at all. It's actually, it's pretty devastating.
It really is. It sort of anchors the entire tragedy of his early life, doesn't it?
It does.
He chose that date because his mother, who he was separated from basically as an infant, she managed to sneak away to see him one night. Just one of a handful of times. And she brought him a cake and called him her little Valentine.
And that one phrase, that one memory was the only real tether he had to her, to his own origins. And that's really the mission for this deep dive. We want to get past the marble statue and look at the man who had to build his entire identity from scratch.
Right.
We're working from a whole stack of sources here, biographies, letters, all compiled under the title Frederick Douglass, The Literacy and Legacy of Liberty. And the argument they make is fascinating.
It is.
It posits that literacy wasn't just, a skill for Douglass. It was the specific physical weapon he used to dismantle his own enslavement.
It completely shifts the perspective. We always talk about Douglass the orator, the great speaker.
Of course.
But the sources argue you can't have the orator without first having Douglass the reader.
Yeah.
And that's the journey. We're looking at a boy who starts out trading pieces of bread for spelling lessons and ends up in the White House advising Abraham Lincoln.
It's all about knowledge as a form of rebellion.
Exactly.
So let's go all the way back to the beginning. We're in Talbot County, Maryland. It's around 1818. Douglass is just a little boy, separated from his grandmother, Betty Bailey, and sent to the White House plantation.
And this is where he ends up with the Auld family. And the mistress of the house, Sophia Auld, she starts doing something that was, it was completely against the rules. She starts teaching him the alphabet.
She just saw him as a kid, right? She hadn't been corrupted by the system yet.
She hadn't, but her husband, Hugh Auld, he absolutely knew the rules, and he knew why they existed.
Okay, so this is the moment I really want to drill down on. Hugh Auld finds them, catches her teaching him, and he just shuts it down immediately. But looking at the transcript of what he said, it feels like he wasn't just being cruel. He was revealing the entire game plan.
Oh, 100%. He lays it all out.
He says, and this is almost a direct quote, that if you teach a slave to read, it would forever unfit him to be a slave.
Exactly. He told her it would make Douglass discontent and desire freedom. Douglass himself later called that moment the first decidedly anti-slavery lecture he ever heard.
It's just so ironic. Auld thought he was enforcing the rules of slavery, but he accidentally handed Douglass the key to unlock it.
That's it. That's the whole thing right there. He explicitly connected literacy to rebellion. He was admitting out loud that the entire institution of slavery depended on the enforced ignorance of the people it enslaved.
And for Douglass, it was like a light bulb went on.
Completely. He realized the white man's power wasn't some kind of magic, it was knowledge. And if he could get that knowledge, he could break the chain himself.
Which kicks off this incredibly dangerous phase of his life. The bread for knowledge story is famous, but when you look at the details in the sources, it's actually terrifying.
It is.
He's carrying Webster's blueback spelling book around in his pocket like it's a loaded gun.
Because it was contraband. And just think about the transaction for a second. He's taking bread, actual physical sustenance, and trading it for literacy.
He's literally starving his body to feed his mind.
Yes. And he's so smart about it. He figures out the one advantage he has over the poor white kids in the neighborhood.
They're hungry for food, and he's hungry for knowledge, for freedom.
Right. He turns the whole power dynamic upside down. He said, for a single biscuit, any of my hungry little playmates would give me a lesson. But we have to remember the risk. If he gets caught with that book, it's not a slap on the wrist.
No. It's the whipping post.
You flagged the Virginia Code from 1819 in the notes. I mean, it's just brutal.
It is. It classifies teaching slaves to read as an unlawful assembly.
Correct. The law said that any meeting for the purpose of learning to read or write could be broken up by force, and the people involved could be punished with 20 lashes.
20 lashes. That was the price tag on learning the alphabet.
So every time he's trying to read a newspaper, every time he's trading a biscuit for a word, he is risking torture. He's risking his life.
And yet, he keeps going. He's piecing together what he called an ideological opposition to slavery. But, learning to spell is one thing. Learning how to completely deconstruct a moral and legal system, that's another level.
That's the leap he has to make.
Yeah.
He needed a framework. He needed to learn how to think and how to argue like the very people who were oppressing him.
Which brings us to the purchase, a purchase that I think you can argue changes the entire trajectory of American history. Douglass is about 13 years old. He has scraped together 50 cents, which must have taken him months, maybe longer, running errands.
An incredible sum for him.
And he walks into a shop and buys a specific book, The Columbian Orator.
And we have to be clear about what this book was. This wasn't a storybook. It wasn't the Bible. It was basically a how-to manual for rhetoric and debate.
Right. It was the standard textbook for young, rich, white boys to learn how to speak in public, how to be a leader.
So he wasn't just learning words on a page. He was downloading the operating system of the ruling class. He was learning the art of persuasion.
And inside this book, he finds a passage that seems almost too perfect to be true. It's titled Dialogue Between a Master and Slave.
Can you imagine? I mean, for a kid in his position, finding that?
It's a debate. The slave in the story uses logic, reason, and moral philosophy to just completely dismantle every argument the master makes for slavery.
Every single one.
Wow.
He argues that might does not make right, that his labor is being stolen, all of it. He wins the argument.
And in the book, the master actually admits defeat. He voluntarily frees the slave.
He does. The master is vanquished at every turn. Think of the psychological impact of reading that. Douglass wrote that before this book, he just felt this constant crushing grief. He saw no way out.
But this showed him a path.
It did. It gave him the words to articulate his own condition, and more importantly, it gave him hope that the argument for freedom could actually be won. It turned slavery from this unchangeable fact of nature into a man-made system. And a man-made system can be unmade.
And in typical Douglass fashion, he doesn't just keep this knowledge to himself. He immediately tries to scale it up.
Of course.
At 16, he's running a secret Sunday school in a free black man's home.
Right. Teaching more than 40 other enslaved people to read the New Testament. He's trying to replicate his own liberation for others.
But the system pushes back.
Hard. The local slave owners find out. They don't see a Bible study. They see a rebellion brewing. They see a threat to their property.
And they raid the meeting.
With clubs and stones.
Yeah.
They break it up violently. It just reinforces that central point we made earlier. To the slaveholding class, black literacy was a weapon that had to be confiscated and destroyed.
So, okay, let's fast forward a bit. The secret resistance isn't enough. In 1838, he finally escapes. We won't get deep into the logistics, the sailor's disguise in the train, because what really matters is what happens next.
Right, when he gets north.
He settles in New Bedford, Massachusetts. He marries Anna Murray, a free black woman who helped him escape. And he changes his name from Bailey to Douglass. And this is the moment where the reader becomes the speaker.
He steps onto the public stage. William Lloyd Garrison, the famous editor of The Liberator, discovers him at an abolitionist meeting.
And he takes off. The growth is explosive. The sources describe this one convention in Buffalo, New York.
I love this story.
He starts speaking in an old post office. Then the crowd gets so big they have to move to a church. Then that fills up, and he ends up speaking in a city park to a crowd of 4,000 people.
That kind of scale is just staggering for the 1840s. But it's so important that we don't look at this like it was some kind of celebrity book tour.
No, it was combat.
It was physically dangerous work. In 1843, on a tour in Indiana, he was chased by a mob, beaten unconscious.
Right.
His hand was broken so badly that it never fully healed. He was literally fighting for his life on that stage.
And then he makes a decision that, on the surface, seems just insane, suicidal almost. He publishes his autobiography in 1845, The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass.
This is a huge, calculated risk.
But think about it. He's a fugitive slave. The book gives his real name, his former master's name, the location of the plantation. He's basically handing the slave catchers a signed confession and a map.
So why do it?
Exactly why?
Because he had to. He was so eloquent, so brilliant. thanks to the Columbian Order, that people in the North started doubting he was ever really a slave.
They thought he was a fraud.
They thought he was a fake, an educated, free black man from the North hired by the abolitionists. To be effective, to have his story land, he had to prove it was true, even if it meant risking his freedom.
So the book makes him the most famous black man in the world, but it also paints a giant target on his back.
It's both his greatest weapon and his greatest liability. The book is essentially a wanted poster, and that's why, as soon as it's published, he has to flee the country.
This is the trip to Ireland and Britain. I always thought of that as a speaking tour, but it was really an exile. He was on the run.
He was a fugitive from American law. But look at how he uses that time. He's there for 2 years, right in the middle of the Great Famine in Ireland, and he connects the struggle of the starving Irish peasantry to the struggle of American slaves.
And while he's there, his friends in Britain raise money for him, about $700.
Which brings the whole story full circle in this strange, ironic way.
They use that money to legally buy his freedom from his old master, Hugh Old.
It's a transaction that a lot of abolitionists, including some of his friends, were disgusted by.
Because it acknowledges the master's right of ownership.
Right. But for Douglass, it was purely pragmatic. He wanted to come back to the United States and continue the fight without constantly looking over his shoulder. He bought his body back so he could unleash his mind.
And when he does come back, his strategy shifts again. He doesn't just want to be a speaker on someone else's platform.
No, he wants to own the platform.
He starts his own newspapers, the North Star, the New National Era. He understood that if you want to control the message, you have to own the printing press.
He becomes a media mogul. And that leverage, that platform, is what sets the stage for the next chapter, for the Civil War and for Lincoln.
Okay, so let's talk about the Lincoln connection, because I think this is another area that often gets romanticized. People imagine Lincoln and Douglass as these two best friends working side by side.
And that really wasn't it. It wasn't a friendship, not at first. It was a negotiation. Douglass was a radical pushing for immediate abolition. Lincoln was a politician, a pragmatist. They were often at odds.
And that first meeting, August 1863, the Civil War is raging. Can you just paint the scene for us? Douglass just walks up to the White House.
Effectively, yes. And you have to picture this. He's the only black man in a sea of white office seekers and politicians, all clamoring to see the president. The tension must have been incredible.
You'd assume the guards would just turn him away.
They tried to ignore him. But Douglass, he pulls this incredible move. He doesn't beg or cause a scene. He plays by the rules of the elite.
The calling card?
The calling card. He passes his card through the crowd, hand over hand, until it reaches the president's secretary. It's such a power move. It says, I belong here just as much as any of you.
And it works. Lincoln summons him almost immediately. But here's the key part. Douglass doesn't walk into the Oval Office just grateful to be in the room.
No. He walks in angry.
He's there to confront the president. He demands two things. Equal pay for black soldiers, who were being paid almost half of what white soldiers got, and he demands retaliation for the Confederate policy of executing black prisoners of war.
This was not a friendly chat. It was a showdown.
But Lincoln's reaction, according to Douglass, was surprisingly vulnerable.
Yeah. Douglass said that Lincoln's voice quivered when he talked about the executions. Lincoln promised him he would sign commissions to make black soldiers officers, and that he'd do what he could. It was this moment of real human connection.
A moment of mutual respect.
Exactly. Douglass realized that Lincoln wasn't the enemy. He was a man trapped by immense political pressure, but his heart was moving in the right direction.
But the real payoff of this relationship, and maybe the culmination of Douglass's entire life of literacy, comes at the second inaugural address in March of 1865.
The victory lap. The war is basically over.
Douglass goes to the reception at the White House that evening. But even then, at this moment of triumph, the old habits of the system die hard. The police at the door stop him.
They try to escort him out through a side passage, basically to hide him.
But he refuses to leave. He gets word to Lincoln, and suddenly the entire scene just flips.
It does.
He's escorted into the Grand East Room. And Lincoln, in the middle of this massive crowd of dignitaries, he spots him from across the room.
And he calls out, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Here comes my friend Douglass."
Just pause on that for a second. The boy who was trading bread for the alphabet in Baltimore is now my friend Douglass to the President of the United States.
And Lincoln doesn't just wave. He stops the receiving line. He takes Douglass by the hand and says, "I saw you in the crowd today. How did you like my speech?"
And Douglass tries to be polite, right? He says something like, "Mr. Lincoln, I must not detain you with this crowd here."
But Lincoln insists. He says, and this is the quote that gives me chills, "There is no man in the country whose opinion I value more than yours."
That is the ultimate validation.
It is. The argument that started in the Columbian orator has reached its conclusion in the White House. And Douglas's response is perfect. He just looks at him and says, "Mr. Lincoln, that was a sacred effort."
Wow. And he didn't stop there. After the war, after abolition was won, he didn't just retire.
Not at all. He broadened the fight. The sources note he was at the Seneca Falls Convention for Women's Rights way back in 1848. He called himself a woman's rights man. He understood that all these struggles for justice were connected.
There's a quote from a speech he gave late in his life, 1886, that feels like it could have been written yesterday.
Let's hear it.
He said, "Where justice is denied, where poverty is enforced, where ignorance prevails, and where any one class is made to feel that society is an organized conspiracy to oppress, rob, and degrade them, neither persons nor property will be safe."
Where ignorance prevails.
Mm-hmm.
He always brought it back to that.
Always. He knew that ignorance was the primary tool of the oppressor.
Which means that knowledge literacy, critical thinking, the ability to read the world, that was the primary tool of the liberator.
Douglass passed away in 1895. But looking at all this material, his legacy isn't really about the past. It feels more like a challenge to us right now.
I think so. If you synthesize this whole story, you're looking at a man who understood that information is power. He risked his life to get it, he used it to free himself, and then he dedicated his life to using it to free millions of others.
And that leads us to the final, maybe uncomfortable question we should ask ourselves. We live in an age where information isn't scarce, it's overwhelming, it's free, it's right here in our pockets, we don't have to trade bread for it.
So the question is, in an age where accessing knowledge is completely safe and effortless, are we using our literacy, our voice, with even a fraction of the purpose that Douglass used his?
Are we using it to challenge systems? To argue for justice? Or are we just, scrolling past it all? Thank you for joining us for this day in his story. May the lessons of yesterday inspire you to see God's hand today and to play your part in his story now. For more faith-based learning, visit ahsworldwide.org, the homeschool for faith and family.